Hello class, this is Alicia Losbeek, and my two lessons that I taught during this unit were on child labor, and I had the students create monologues after they researched children that were child laborers during the Industrial Revolution, and I also taught about communism and had a social science experiment to teach that.
And hello everyone, I'm Jennifer Golay, and my two lessons were on geography and anthropology. With the geography lesson, students would learn about the Industrial Revolution and how it started, and also how it traveled to the United States. And they would compare and contrast how people were affected before and after the Industrial Revolution. And then my anthropology lesson would have students learning how the Industrial Revolution impacted different cultures and countries in different ways.
And I'm Janelle Downs. And my first lesson, both my lessons were on economics, and the first was an assembly line lesson in which the students explored the mechanics of an assembly line and the effects on the economy. And my second lesson was the game of life, which was an economics lesson to explore the effects on the entire economy during the Industrial Revolution.
Hi, and I'm Paige. Let's see, both of my lessons were on history. The first lesson, students will research a brief timeline in small groups and then of the history during the Industrial Revolution, and then they'll kind of create their own lesson to do a peer teaching for what they discovered. And then the other lesson I did, students will experience what it was like to be in a factory and sew a quilt either by hand, or they would be a part of the life after the Industrial Revolution and create a quilt using a sewing machine. So this will show students how much improvement the Industrial Revolution has impacted society in the working class. Our theme was the Industrial Revolution, our theme was production, distribution, and consumption. Our topic we chose was the Industrial Revolution because we felt it was the most fitting, since it is exactly production, distribution, and consumption of how the technical advances affected families and countries differently, the changes in the lives of children and their roles during the time of the Industrial Revolution and now. So these were the questions we wanted our students to focus on during our unit. Why is it important to study the Industrial Revolution, and how did the Industrial Revolution change the course of our country? And our grade level was 5.
And for our learning outcomes, we wanted students to be able to explain why the Industrial Revolution is important. We wanted students to be able to demonstrate using a variety of strategies how the Industrial Revolution changed the course of our country. And finally, students would be able to compare and contrast the economy before the Industrial Revolution and after the Industrial Revolution. For our summative assessment, we decided to do a final test. And the reason we wanted to do this is most of our lessons were projects that it included engaging and hands-on learning. So we thought a test would be most beneficial. It was important for us in our test to cover the broad topics of the unit, so it would not so much be about students comprehending the dates and the times, but instead it would be about them understanding the who, what, when, where, and why of the unit.
And for collaborative planning, our group collaborated together really well, making it a positive experience. We all contributed ideas and helped each other out with forming our unit. Scheduling was a challenge because we have one group member in college sports. A lot of us work and then have families, and so that was definitely a challenge, but we were really good about communicating our schedules and what times and days worked best for us, and then we would all meet up. We also found that setting deadlines and holding group members accountable was also key.
And learning about ourselves. When I thought about what I learned from this assignment and from the group project, I realized that collaborating is a great way to create a unit. I think that when you collaborate, you get more ideas, and I think your unit has more learning modalities included. Sometimes you can focus on the ones that you learn best from, so when you collaborate with others, you include many more modalities. Also, receiving constructive feedback from the group was really helpful, and I think it just brought more creativity to our unit.
And I learned that two heads are better than one. Whenever we were stuck on where to go during our planning process, we could rely on other team members to supply ideas or just have more people to bounce ideas off of. Our unit wouldn't have been what it is without the creativity and ideas supplied by all four of us.
And something that I learned was I liked creating my own lesson much better than tweaking someone else's. It was really nice to have the template of other people's lessons to work off of, but for me, just having the freedom of a blank slate helped me to consider every aspect of the lesson in a more meaningful way, not only for me, but for my hypothetical students as well. I still use resources and ideas to help me plan my own lessons, such as online resources as well as my teammates. But in the end, I felt more ownership over the lesson I created rather than the one that I just tweaked.
I learned that setting deadlines for each section of the project was super important because when we took the time to decide what portions were, when they'd be, okay, I'm starting over. So we took the time to decide when portions of the unit would be completed, and then we could meet up and discuss what we had so far, allowing room for changes. I felt that this helped our group significantly and made our unit flow a lot better.
So then thinking about the planning process and things that we would change, one thing that I would change would be more peer review. We did that with one of our lessons, but I think it would have been really nice for us to look closer at each other's lessons. We never really thought about doing it again after the first time, but as Alicia said earlier, two heads are better than one, so it would have made our unit even stronger than it is now if we had taken that time to give each other positive and critical feedback.
I learned that although our unit flowed together, we wish we would have read each other's lessons in more detail in order to have the knowledge for each group member to teach the unit on their own.
And I learned that we should have come at it more with backwards design. We struggled with coming up with end goals and then supplying those activities and assessments that would help our students reach those goals. Instead, we found ourselves becoming excited about activity ideas that fit under our topic and then moving on from there.
And I wish we would have had more in-depth IEFA and content disciplines. We do have some IEFA in our lessons, but I would love to see it be more relevant and seamlessly incorporated. Sometimes that can be a little tricky to do.
So talking about our unit overall, there were some things that we would obviously like to change. One of them being in our game of life, which was the lesson that we taught in class. We talked about how during the game there was quite a bit of standing around time for the students, and so having several mini games basically going on at the same time would keep interaction up between the students as well as cut the downtime quite a lot, as well as making it more rigorous by adding questions to each card rather than just having some cards focused on questions, or while the students were in line asking them questions to keep them engaged in what they were supposed to be learning. The second thing that we talked about that we would like to change would be more variety of teaching strategies. So when we went through and read our unit, at the end we realized that we all kind of focused on the teacher giving information or the students researching information, and then there being a project that the students completed at the end, and which is great, but we decided that if we were to redesign this a little bit, we would focus more on different instructional strategies just to meet all of our students' learning styles, so that there was more variety in the unit as a whole.
We also supplied some tips for teaching this unit. So in this unit, we would preview those difficult topics with students before teaching. So for example, when we are teaching about child labor, those are some tough topics that can get a little bit graphic. So making sure that you're keeping in mind the age level of your students, as well as we also talked about when we taught the game of life to not have those labels of rich and poor, just because we will have some students that are lower income. So being considerate and compassionate of that. Know your students so you can modify and accommodate those lessons. So we'll have some students that are more gifted and talented. So knowing how to modify your lesson to make it more rigorous for them, but not more busy work. and also accommodating those students that struggle by bringing in an aide or providing some sort of scaffolding to help them with the unit. We also mentioned planning for your classroom space. In the game of life, we needed a lot of classroom space, and a lot of the desks moved and spread to the outer edges of the room. And we also had that in some of our other lessons as well, where we would just need more space to implement them. And then lastly, ask for help when needed. So whether it's a principal to swing an idea by him or asking for help from your grade level teams, and also not being afraid to ask for help from parent volunteers.
And lastly, we have our resources, and this is not an exhaustive list. Obviously, with such a big unit, we have a lot of resources that we pulled from, but these were some of just the more important ones that we found helpful in creating the unit. One thing we did learn, though, when looking at the unit and the resources we did use, we found that it was a struggle for us to find accurate resources from that time period that provided the pricing of goods and the salary of people and the ages that kids started working, and all that kind of stuff was pretty hard to find. And that kind of went along with our other struggle with it, was making sure that the lessons that we revised were accurate and they went along with other resources that we had found about the time period. So just, we had to make sure that all that matched up and we were making a relevant and rigorous unit for our students. And with that, that concludes our presentation. Thank you.